Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm Charlie Mann of Law Firm Alchemy. And my guest today, I've actually been having conversations with him about the law firm world now for about 6.5 months, like since the business launch, which this will now date when this was recorded, because he's got this really interesting multifactorial background that I want to ask him more questions about here, pull out lessons from his own life, entrepreneur, investor, all of this other good stuff that makes this individual who he is. And it's so funny because I always do these introductions knowing full well you, the listener, can see the person's name already, and yet I still feel like I have to do the build up. So I'm really excited to have here the founder of Acting Executives and fractional COO, Jon Cumberworth. Jon, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Charlie. Appreciate it, man.
I'm excited to talk with you. So you know how we kick this off. What's the one thing they don't teach you in law school?
Yeah, we'll have to preface it with, I haven't been to law school, but I've talked to plenty of lawyers, worked with enough law firms to know I'm going to go past the cliche, how to run a business. But for me, they don't teach in law school how to be intentional about how to build a healthy and strong culture in your business. And the second part that I think they don't teach, and I'll tie this all back together, is they don't teach you how and when to be vulnerable as a leader or as a business owner as well. And having that vulnerability doesn't mean you have to be vulnerable in front of everybody, but knowing what your strengths, your weaknesses are, that leads to being a better leader because you're going to grow personally. And having that healthy and strong work culture over a toxic culture isn't something you do overnight. It's something that is intentional and takes time to produce. So.
Okay, I want to zoom in on something you said there, Jon, which is it doesn't happen overnight, because this is my admitted bugaboo with some of the culture discussion that happens, which is where people go to a conference, they hear about the importance of culture, they go home and say, guess what? We now have a great culture. It's like, whoa, hold on just a moment, my friend. This is something that we have to start making changes. And I think a lot of law firms, and I'll just speak in generalities here, and then I'm interested in your framework on this. A lot of law firms come at this from they don't have maybe not a horrendous culture, but they don't necessarily have a good culture. They start from this just behind the curve neutral culture. So what does a law firm need to do to start making progress?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, it starts from the top, right? So it's as a business owner, as a leader, the main thing is knowing where you want to go with your business. So what is your purpose? What is your mission? Are you looking to grow a massive firm? Are you looking to grow a small to medium-sized firm and be successful and help your clients and be really client focused? So the first is knowing where you're going. The second is knowing who you are. So there's so many businesses and firms out there that don't have core values. They haven't taken the time to sit down and say, who are we and what do we really value? Having core values is the most important part of a business, in my opinion, because it tells you who you are, how you work, but also who you want to bring on board as team members. And so if you have people that have different values all over the place, it's going to be really difficult to have a cohesive team. I played sports my whole life, basketball in high school and college, and throughout my career have been in businesses that have toxic cultures where it's like, get there at 5 a.m., leave at 8 p.m., grind. And other side is where leaders actually care and have a sincere desire to improve their team's development. And it's such night and day as a team member. So really it's about core values, to bring it all back to and circle back, but knowing who you are is probably the most important thing.
It's that core values thing. I agree with you. Core values are really important, especially the utilization of core values. Of course, the process of getting to core values, it strikes me, Jon, and in my own experience, that core values, a lot of times, it's a set of maybe more aspirational statements than really what the core values are of a business. How do you balance the achievement side of core values versus the honest examination of where a business currently sits?
It's really a team experiment or a team exercise as well. So I did this with my business Client Chat Live with our team, and I started out with what I thought we wanted to be, and it took my team members to say, "Hey, we're not that. That would be great, but this isn't who we are."
Mm.
And again, as a leader, it was like, "Oh, you're right. That's 100% correct." So it really is important to know who you are right now, what you value, not what you want to become. That's very different for sure. So it is hard to have that honest feedback, but again, being vulnerable and knowing, what you're strong at, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, that's really helpful.
Okay, you mentioned vulnerability. You kind of demonstrated it with that of saying you had a team that was willing to say like, "Hey, that's not who we are today." That in and of itself, I think, is a difficult place for a lot of business owners, law firm owners to get to. Why do you think in that moment that team felt safe to respond in that way to you?
Yeah, we all love to be that leader that's decisive. We're 3 steps ahead. We have all the answers, and especially lawyers, right? Everybody thinks the lawyer is the smartest in the room. So I know you have that anxiety. You have to be the smartest. You have to know exactly what the answer is. And that's just a lot of anxiety building, right? And so over time, you have to be, again, vulnerable. I keep using that word. But for me, that team member, one was I've known him for years. And so he was comfortable with me giving me feedback. But in other moments, if he had brought up different ideas just day to day, and I always shot them down and said, "No, we're doing it this way. This is the way to do it." And never gave him that time and openness, and never listened to his feedback before that, he would never have spoken up. So, if you're an employee and you have ideas and they're constantly shot down, either one, your ideas are terrible, but
We have to be real. Sometimes that is the case.
Yeah, that's true. But it's one of those, like, you're going to be hesitant to speak up. Either you don't want to get your head bit off in a meeting, or you're kind of like, what's the point? We're just going to go with the partner's idea anyway. So having that ability to hear people, it will lead to that moment of them having that empowerment or having that feeling to speak up.
So that's obviously that's a process that takes time. That's a level of trust that gets built. I think of it like if you find a stray dog, right? You can't run up to the stray dog and be like, "Come on with me, stray dog," right? You got to lure it in. You got to let it know it's gonna be safe, comfortable. Then you can bring it home. All that. And same thing with getting team members to give feedback. So the issue would appear to me is having the internal insight or the introspection to see that maybe you're not a person who is inviting that. So one, how can we maybe gain introspection? And two, what should we do about that?
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to consistent meetings and meeting rhythm, and not just meetings to have meetings, but when you meet with a team member, direct report in a group setting, right? A staff meeting, they may not be as willing to voice their opinion in front of other people. It's super important to have weekly one-on-one meetings where you give them a platform to share their feedback and ultimately listen to their feedback. Don't just check the box and say, "Okay, thanks for that. See you next week." But those businesses that have like a quarterly review, and they don't talk to somebody until the quarter's up, and then it's a surprise on their performance, or they're not getting a raise, whatever that is, that's awful. And it's awful from a leadership standpoint and from an employee standpoint. So having those consistent conversations and really being sincere and, okay, how can I help you as a leader? What tools do you need? Not to give them everything, of course. You're not just going to bend every time you need to, but giving them.
But that's the temptation, isn't it? That is the temptation.
Yeah.
Is you hear a request and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to solve the problem," which is faster. So how do we slow down to speed up?
It's clarity. They need clarity in their job role, what their day to day is. So we can all have 10 KPIs, right? We all have so many things going on, so many balls in the air. It's like I can be measured on all these things. Break it down to 3, no more than 3. And within those 3, the salesperson's the easiest one to look at. How many clients did you sign?
Yep.
That's the easiest one. Okay, well, within that, you've got to have, okay, how many calls did you do? How many demos did you do? How many consults did you do? How many PCs did you talk to? All of those, there's little metrics in there. But ultimately, it's, hey, salesperson or attorney, how many clients did you sign this week? And it's up to them to know this is my KPI. I'm in charge of it. And here's how I'm going to approach getting more clients this week or this month, and have them empowered, like give them the tools they need to be successful, but ultimately put it in their court, right? Make them responsible for it and responsible for reporting it too. And to me, I think that gives them that somewhat autonomy to feel empowered, but it's that idea of, hey, these are the expectations. I'm going to do anything and everything I can to support you, but I'm not going to do it for you. And so I think people want that. They want that clarity of what they're expected to do, and go that route.
Yeah, I have conversations regularly with coaching clients about this type of issue, about the letting go. I think I'd really be interested in your perspective, because I think it always helps to have, I know it always helps to have multiple perspectives on this idea, which is when you have team members who are repeatedly coming to you with small questions, oftentimes the same type of question over and over again, how as a leader do you start to give that back to them? So that way, and you've already alluded, clarity on job role, but even then, sometimes they're still popping into the office. What should you be doing as a leader to not only set them up to succeed in that way, but enforce succeeding in that way?
It goes back to that very first comment I made on knowing where you want to go as a business. Mm-hmm. So probably the most impactful thing I had in my career as an entrepreneur with Client Chat Live was when we as a team sat down and said, what is our purpose? Why do we exist? It used to exist. Oh, this is an idea and we can make some money on it. Well, you can't hire somebody and say, come help me make money. I had a good idea. Ready, go. And it's as you get to that certain size, you need more purpose. And we ended up coming up with supporting professional success. And so it took us a while to wordsmith that, to figure out what that meant. That meant supporting a professional, a digital marketing agency. They're professionals. They want to be successful. How do we support them? An attorney or a law firm, they want to play golf on Friday, but they want to have enough cases to make it worthwhile so they can do that. Another firm may want to add 10 attorneys. They want to grow, sign cases. How do we support their success? So having that North Star really allowed me to not reinvent the wheel in those conversations. And it was, they would ask, well, what about this idea? What about this? Okay, will that get you closer to your core three, one of your core three KPIs? Yes. Will that get us on our way to our quarterly priority or annual priority? Yes. Does that support professional success? Yes. All good. And so the next time they may not need to ask that question. They can figure that out on their own. Yeah. It takes a little bit of time, but it's just that consistency. You're not changing your approach to it. It's keeping you as a leader on focused as well. So for me, that was like a huge weight off my shoulders. And it's like, this is not rocket surgery, but there it is. It's easy. And I can say, yes, that does support their success. Let's do it.
Okay, I've heard you mention KPIs a couple of times, very justifiably and everything. But now that I'm interested in rounding back the KPIs to the original statement about developing a great culture within a practice, because there are a lot of firm owners that struggle with balancing some of those because they want the culture side, the way they perceive it sometimes, of a level of kindness, of like, hey, we're taking care of our people. But then there is I'll call it the brutality of KPIs. How do we equally balance what some see as competing factors and allow both of them to flourish within a practice?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into setting KPIs. The first and foremost is the law firms. It's a business, right? Sales hides all sins. Everybody says that. You have to have clients coming in. You have to have revenue. Everybody understands that. But when you're setting those KPIs, the first thing you can do, if someone's done these before, so like if you need to sign 10 clients a month, has somebody done that before in your firm? Yes, then it's realistic. So you want them to be realistic. The way I went about it was I worked with my team, and depending on the role is I said, this is what I think these top 3 are for your role. And if they've been in that role for a little while, what do you think your top 3 are? Let's talk about it. What numbers should be there? What should the number be set at? That way they're having some skin in the game on creating those KPIs, creating those key performance indicators and those targets.
Yeah.
Which does help. But a lot of times it hasn't been done, and it's maybe a new role, and it's like, hey, this is an arbitrary number. We're going to look at this every week. And if it's way off board, we'll look at it and we'll adjust it. But this is what we've set to achieve what we set out on our mission, which is to help 2,000 law firms with, through blah, 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 whatever that mission was. And that math can work out, but ultimately it's being clear with, this hasn't been done before, but it's realistic, and here's how we're going to do it. Ready, break, and getting their buy-in and their belief that it can be done. So it's definitely a team thing. It's not a this is what you're going to do and go. I'm going to support you. And I think the way you hold people accountable, obviously, is by the numbers. But then it's, hey, in our one-on-one, you said you were going to do these things as part of the attack plan or part of the plan to achieve that, where you did all these other things that weren't even related to these targets. Right. Let's get back on track. Right. And it's, oh yeah, that's right. Focus should be on that. My bad. We'll do that. And so it's, you're not waiting a month or a quarter to talk to them about that. It's weekly. So it's
okay. I got to ask real quick about the weekly meetings, Jon, because admittedly, I will play proxy for the audience here. And I can promise you that like half the people had a panic attack earlier when you said that you need to have weekly one-on-ones, because they're like, I have 12, I have 16, I have 7 team members. You want me to meet one-on-one with all of them every week? Right. So let's frame that out with some context.
Yeah. The answer is yes. You need to. I'm just kidding. So,
dude, you gave someone a heart attack by doing that, Jon.
Weekly meetings, weekly one-on-ones are for your direct reports. So, if you're a firm of 16, you likely should only have 6 to 8 direct reports, maybe even fewer. Yeah. That means you've got a first chair attorney, and they have a paralegal that reports to them. You're not meeting with the paralegal. Right. You're meeting with your direct reports, and then those folks have one-on-ones with their direct reports. So it's that consistent framework. Everybody's getting a one-on-one with their manager or with whoever they report to. So this is where it goes into the importance of organizational structure. People know who they report to. People know who their manager is, who their leader is. So it's not, chaos. Well, I go here for the partner on this question, and I go over here to the intake manager for this question, the marketing director for this question. It's whoever that direct report is. So set up that structure to where you're talking with who maybe your marketing leader, and you're getting their KPIs, their feedback, their struggles, their roadblocks, and they're using, the input from their team to present to you as well. So just the direct reports, if you have too many, try to whittle that down. And that's a great opportunity to start promoting within and start developing leaders within, have them start taking on more responsibility.
That's a really important point that you just made, which is by changing that dynamic and focusing on who your most valuable direct reports are. Let's say you got that firm of 16 people and you're talking with 4 or 5 of them every single week. You've now opened up space for those people to then talk with their relevant 4 or 5 people each week. And exactly what you're saying there, Jon, is you've now made space for others to become leaders. Now, as you're growing those leaders in the practice, that vulnerability that you talked about earlier, I find there are different levels of vulnerability within law firms, and some are, we'll say, within a tolerable or acceptable range. And then there are some that are, how much should the leader be openly bleeding in front of the team versus how much should they be buttoned up? Like, just in your experience, is there a pseudo happy medium? Is there a way to find balance there? Or maybe even it's easier to say what just outright doesn't work. I'm curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's going to vary by the person and the personality.
Mm-hmm.
So my leadership style, I'm not a my way or the highway type person. I'm a lot more democratic. And that's even gotten me in trouble sometimes, is bringing some people into the strategic thinking. And they're like, well, now I'm a manager, so I should be paid more. And it's like, whoa, I was just being democratic here and trying to be open to inclusive.
That's an important point right there.
Yeah. And so for me, I'm listening, and it's a little bit different level of vulnerability in terms of I'm not out there sharing my personal life and my struggles and with everybody, maybe just a couple leaders that I trust within the circle,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really going to depend on the individual. But vulnerability just means you're open to a mindset change, or you're open to a behavior change as well. So if someone hires you, Charlie, and they come in and they're like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I just don't want to do any of this stuff. It's not, I mean, they have to want to be led. They have to want to be coached. And the same goes for the team members. And so sometimes you might have one team member that you have to get more vulnerable in front of them for them to really believe you're sincere. And you're just going to have to gauge that, individually. Some people are like, I don't want this guy crying at me all day. They're a stronger team, whatever. And you're just going to have to go person to person and really understand what drives them, how they want to be led. Maybe they're more sensitive and they want to see that from you as well.
I like that. I think that, a lot of what you're adding here, John, some layers of context. So that way people can understand that a lot of this, it's not a set of absolutes that go in place. This is the most difficult part of being an owner, an entrepreneur, a leader, is living comfortably within what feels like a gray zone at times. And it's funny, I was just listening to an interview with an actor. I cannot remember who it was. She was very big in the 70s or 80s. And she was talking about working with great directors. And she said, the greatest directors that she really worked with, the ones who would draw out the best performance from some of the actors and even the production designers and everything, the ones who you would watch them walk over to one actor and understand that actor needed them to be very specific about, like, okay, here's going to be your blocking, and you're going to find yourself in this space, and then other people needed a little bit of a softer touch. They need to, perform their artistry. Now, the worst directors were the ones who just let everyone walk all over them, right? Who just let all the actors do only what the actors wanted to do and were unable to step in and go, that's not going to work on this set. No, thank you. So to that end, as a leader being vulnerable, how do you handle a situation where you ultimately do need to step in and go, that isn't how it works here? Doing so tactfully, but also in a way that maybe improves the culture at the same time.
Yeah, I think for me, and I've had to do that before, and it was not really like my MO. It was, okay, this is how we're doing it. Sorry, guys, this is how customer success is going to work. We get a ticket. This is who's handling it, because there was so much kind of ambiguity. But for me, it was taking it back to, this is why we're going to do it this way. This is for the greater good. We want to support professional success. We want to be an integral service provider to law firms. In order to do that, we have to provide great service. And if we let something slip through the cracks, that's not great service. So here's why we're doing it: because of that top-down, purpose, mission, annual priorities. And that's where it goes back to that framework, where it made it easier on me to just point back instead of having to make something up and say, do it because, if you have kids, that's the worst. Like, because I said so. We've all done it. All the time. I probably did it yesterday. Like, just do it. But
yes,
if you have something to kind of fall back on, like the why, they're like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, cool. For the most part. And also, hiring people to your values that share your core values as a business, it does help get to that buy-in, maybe not faster, but more consistently. You're not having to pull people along. They get it. And they share, a lot of the same things that you value as a business or as a leader. Once you start to get that team in place, you're like, man, I wish I'd done this sooner. How could I have not seen this? This is so easy. Things are moving a lot better. I don't have to explain myself 10 times. And it's, for me, it's just the greater why is more impactful.
Since we've mentioned core values a few times now and talked a little bit about it, I would love a little maybe structure around core values about in terms of developing core values for a law firm that either is new to developing their core values or maybe needs to rework their core values. Is there any type of structure of what they should do or shouldn't do that could help them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is incorporating not just the business owner. So if the owner of the firm just says, hey, these are the core values I came up with, let's live by them. That doesn't seem to work very well. And so incorporate your leadership team. It doesn't mean incorporate every single person in the firm, but definitely incorporate your leadership team. And there's different exercises. I love the book 3HAG Way. And that's a whole kind of framework, not like an EOS, but they have some exercises in there. It's brainstorming, listing out some statements, some words that you can use to describe how you work or what you value. And another thing is once you start to wordsmith some of them, as a leader, it was one of the questions was, if you started another business, would this still be important to that business? Like industry agnostic. Yes. Well, that's core to you. Awesome. That's something that can like withstand the test of time. So there's different ways to kind of test them out. If you had them on the wall, is it just wallpaper, integrity and all good? And you just write it really big, or do you actually work that way and live that way? So really, really test it and brainstorm and ask the team, yes, this is accurate. This is who we are. And you'll start to feel it. And throughout quarterly reviews, your team members, one thing I used to ask them is, give me an example of something you did in the quarter for each one of the core values. And it was cool to see what they came up with. It was cool to see how they defined what the value meant to them as well. It was a little bit different for me, but it was in the end, ultimately the same core value.
There we go. I get asked this a lot, so I think it's always worth getting someone else's answer. Is there a right number of core values that someone should have?
I don't think so. I would say if you have like 10, that might be a little bit hard to keep up with.
I agree.
Sweet spot 3 to 5, and 3 might be too few. But ultimately what you want to get to is not just the statement, but almost like, the websites that have like a click down, like an FAQ. You see the core value, you click it down, and this is what it means to us. And it's a little bit more explanation. So if you can have 3 to 5 with some of those click downs, explanations, and a little bit more detail behind them, I think that's a sweet spot, but avoid too many.
I absolutely agree, because core values are only as useful as whether or not you use them. And that's always the biggest issue. I'm sure you've encountered that many times where people can maybe say the core values, which is great, right? Okay, we've actually got people using the words. They've memorized them. But how they use the words is really impactful. At Law Firm Alchemy, one of our core values is intention. And so we talk about it, if there's what feels like a sloppy choice that has been made, we'll refer back to intentions. Like, well, what was the intention behind that? Did we make a deliberate decision here? And we actually use that in 2 ways. It's both making deliberate decisions, but also setting your intentions. What are your goals that you have? And we try and use them as frequently as possible. We have 6 of them. I'll admit some of them get used way more than the others. We don't always refer back to love, which is one of our core values. with some frequency, but we hope that we're living that out in general and putting love out into the universe. That's one of our things.
Yeah.
So yeah, you actually had kind of an interesting, and it's funny, like the thing that most people start a podcast with is now how we're going to maybe come towards the close of this, which is the getting to know Jon a little bit, because, and the reason I want to do that is because you have an interesting gateway into the legal spaces brought you to where you are today. So talk a little bit about, and you mentioned it just like for a half second earlier on, what you had been doing before Acting Executives.
Yeah, so I'll turn the clock back to 2008. Didn't have the beard. Definitely, if I did, it wouldn't be as gray. But a good friend of mine who's a personal injury attorney, we played basketball in college together. We started a business called Client Chat Live. I was just starting as a sales rep for an energy company and steel distribution in Houston, and he was just starting his law firm in Austin, getting into digital marketing. He didn't have a lot of referrals, so live chat for law firms was something that not many folks were doing, but
that was early on that front.
It was pretty early. So we licensed some software, hired agents. So on the weekends, I was doing operations. He was kind of helping out, and we hired a friend of ours to run it day to day. My business or my job took me to Dubai. So no kids. We were like, we'll go anywhere. So going to Dubai, I put Client Chat Live kind of on the side for me. And my friend that we hired ran it day to day, operations, sales. We bootstrapped it. And while I was over there, I was there for 5 years running a steel supply chain distribution company for oil and gas distributors or manufacturers, taking them from 18 million to 35 million, setting EBITDA records, and going to the UK and back, and we had 3 kids over there. It was a great place, very Western, and very fun to work in, very fast paced, but a lot of cultures as well, a lot of different cultures. So I'd love to chat about that another time, I'm sure. But 2014, 15, oil and gas started to dip. And my friend said, well, the friend we hired to run the business was going to take a little hiatus. And we said, we either shut it down or, hire somebody. And he said, well, why don't you come back and run it? I said, okay. So I was setting records and my compensation wasn't reflecting that. So I said, I'll take the jump to entrepreneurship. Fast forward, we grew it, sold it in 2021 to the parent company of Alert Communications. A lot of folks are familiar with Alert, do legal call center, legal intake, retainer services, things like that. So worked with them for a little while, and left earlier this year to work with business owners and law firm owners specifically to help them put in systems and frameworks and processes for growing their practice, and helping them become better leaders and hire better, and build that culture. So yeah, definitely kind of across the board, interesting career, but staying in Austin, Texas, not leaving here anytime soon.
Very good. Okay, so before I ask you the last little 3-part question, if people are interested in learning more about you, learning more about what you do, or kind of getting started with you, where should we send them?
I would say LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. So Jon Cumberworth, Jon, you can find me there. Actingexecutives.com, and the acting part is the synonym for interim. So love to provide fractional executives, CMOs, CTOs, CFOs, and obviously COOs to help law firms scale where they need to.
Awesome. All right, Jon, last little 3-part question here. What are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
Yeah, so reading, Michael Lewis is probably my favorite author. I love finance, but or if you're in the South, finance. But I'm actually I listen to my books, so I'm going to kind of cover that. But Liar's Poker, one of his original books about his time at Solomon as a salesman on the bond side, very interesting. But I can't remember the name of it, but it's a combo of his podcasts about coaching and the value of coaching. I would definitely recommend that. That's recently really cool. Read that, and it was pretty impactful as well. He hired a coach to help him sing, and you could see like the value of coaching. So not trying to do a shameless plug for you, but it's super valuable in having a coach. But Michael Lewis, Liar's Poker, and then Outlived is Dr. Peter Attia.
Yeah.
So getting my rucksack and walking around,
There
getting
you go.
stronger. Watching college basketball season. I claim Tucson. I'm an Army brat, but I claim Tucson is home. So Arizona Wildcats, a little up and down this year, but I love college basketball. And then just finished watching Reacher. Just veg out, watch Reacher. And
season 1, it was one of my favorite like surprise hits of the other year. I would took a flyer on it because Alan Richson, he did this really raunchy comedy in the past called Blue Mountain State. I won't officially recommend it because it's too raunchy for me to consider it a recommendation. But I mean, for those of you who have a bluer sense of humor, it's wild and fun.
Yeah, I'm in
but
that
I saw that, started watching Reacher, and I was like, is this really good? Do I really like this? Yeah, I do.
I think it lends to the fact that we all love people that are so decisive and just know exactly what they want. And they're like 3 steps ahead. It's not reality, but it's beautiful to think that we can get there. Right.
Yeah.
We know everything.
That's right.
And then as far as podcasts go, my favorite by far is My First Million. Almost drew a blank there. My First Million with Sam Parr and Sean Purry, and they're kind of tech entrepreneurs, newsletters, things like that. But they interview a lot of people, but they also just talk about new ideas, things that are coming out, and it's entertaining. Love it. And also get that newsletter, Daily Prompts, PROMPTS, for like AI. Love GPT. I know you share that as well, but I'm building my own GPTs, not for the marketplace necessarily, but I know it's coming, and you've got to figure out how to use them and utilize them. So anything AI related.
That's awesome. Well, Jon, my friend, it was great talking with you. I appreciate your insight, wisdom, knowledge, background, all of it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And we'll see you all in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.